Welcome back to WAAAGH Wednesday, where we talk about the rise of the green tide, or in this case, the sway of it, right? So, like always, we like to go to the stats and the facts when we get into this. So, let's start with faction versus faction. So, today, we're just going to take a quick look at the faction versus factions. We have Death Guard still being our hardest matchup. We already know why. We're going to talk about that today as one of our cheeky gets. Then lest we go over today, win against Death Guard and had a hard game. Leagues of Voltan, Scouting Transports, Terminator Breaks, all still in play, all still very deadly for us. Adeptus Custodes, we all understand the difficulties when dealing with them. They're still popular in the meta. A lot of people are teching into defeating them. So at the same time, Custodians have had to start to bring maybe some more tanks. And when they bring more tanks, they don't have as much infantry to deal with us. And they're in a weird place where we're also countering them and seeing them coming. They're a little bit kept in check by other people, so you might miss them in tournaments too and such, right? Adeptus Sororita is one that caught everybody a bit off guard. They're so cheap. They're so plentiful. They're constantly scoring. They can throttle damage when they need to with the dice or be reliably safe and alive. The Necrons, no one's surprised with the Court coming into play, which we'll go over today as well. Very common, even though you would think getting the Hypercrypt will still be used, but nope, Court came up in place. Very, very durable. Very interesting to look at. Black Templars, the best, I would say, pretty much the overall best Space Marine faction to play as. This is one of those things where I think we still have great play into it. It comes down to the skill of each player. These guys are just easier to win with kind of in the Ork matchup, right? Because they're not really relying on necessarily going first and having to call the wall as the initiative. They don't have to think that far into it. So maybe mid-table, newer players such like that will have a harder time dealing with something like Black Templars where they're just like sword brethren in your face, Land Raiders, overwatching, bam, Space Marine stuff, right? Space Marine is always like a good benchmark where you overcome them, you're like, hey, as an Ork player, it feels good. Drakari not being used to their rules is definitely a factor into this, in my opinion, as well as our lack of kind of shooting and them being able to kind of outnumber us and out-unit us, right? We have the Imperial Knights, which is always historically one of those hit or miss matchups with us. I think as people move away from squigs and devastating wounds, sometimes to a certain extent, these guys become harder to use. Canis Rex goes hard. Then we have the Grey Knights with their Dread Knights. I think this is definitely a hard matchup when you really, really skew into the peaks of each of these strength units. Like if they bring Paladins and a bunch of Dread Knights, about 5 or 4, then you're dealing with a hard matchup. Maybe a Redeemer thrown in there too. But if you're playing with like a not proficient unit of like version of the Grey Knights, then Orks can still pressure you, kind of run you over selectively. But this is definitely closer to a 50-50 than most people would think. Thousand Suns has always been sitting on a 50-50 since the start of this edition. Chaos Knights, it's interesting that they're 50-50 and Imperial Knights are. I think it really comes to Canis Rex really helps them in that matchup specifically. And then Chaos Knights, it's a skill-based thing. If you start bringing the big guys and just don't spam War Dogs, it's a big difference as well in its peaks. Astromilk Harm sitting at 50% is quite interesting to me. Maybe it's players just trying to get out there more numerous because they're more powerful and they're getting beat up, and Ork players can kind of beat them and outmaneuver and pressure them, especially if they don't have enough indirect or they misuse their screens and such, and they're not so used to the Orks being able to be all over them and shoot through their tank so quickly in certain cases, right? If you bring the right list. So at the peaks of both of these armies, Astromilk Harm is an extremely hard matchup. So if you're losing that, don't feel bad at all, because I would say this is a little skewed by we'll say the median, right, is probably where this is better off, because at the peaks, when we look at the higher tables, Astromilk Harm dogs work sometimes. But what I want to look at the rest of these, I'm not going to look at every single faction. What this is we have, we'll say about 4, right? We'll just round them on. We'll round up Thousand Suns, Chaos Knights into that, Astromilk Harm, Blood Angels, not Blood Angels, sorry. Yeah, these are about the 50-50 armies, right? Where we actually have a chance statistically that swings here and there. We have about 9 good matchups, surprisingly, but not surprisingly, because I'm not really including Death Watch. It's kind of a bit of a skew thing where people aren't used to them. But you see Gene Stealer's low number army, Adeptus Mechanicus, a low number army as in the number of players that they're being used in their popularity. Space Marine, I think Orks always just kind of have when we peak out at like our strengths and our strengths just overcome the vanilla base Space Marine, right? I'm also interested in how Tyranids have kind of become easier for us for some reason. I'm not really understanding that why necessarily, but hey, it's a thing. Shout out to Jehu for the 5 WAAAGH tactic gets the memberships. Whoa! So collect those. If you're gray, don't stay that way because Jehu just hooked you up with some becoming a little runt. And then once you become a runt, you can become a boy. You'll start leveling up. It's fun. So that being said, it's one of those things where orcs are trying to play a fair game. But when you start looking at these armies that are a bit stronger, a ton of Adeptus Custodia players, a ton of Necron players, right? So the stats tell you, hey, look, you're doing pretty well when you're looking at the number of players for these matchup in these armies and them being difficult. It starts to look like, oh, so the popular armies are kind of what we're having hard time into. 300. We'll look at that actually with our Meta Monday. So actually, let's move over to our Meta Monday. So this weekend we only had 19 Ork players. That's okay. It was a pretty inactive weekend overall, sitting at a 42% win rate. I believe it was sitting at about overall was about 42% win rate. So this is this weekend. It doesn't say on here necessarily the totals this weekend, I guess. Let me see. To zoom out a little bit. Too close? No. Okay, I'm good. So there was no players really went 5 and 1 necessarily. So overall, Orks are doing good. And oh, whoa. Excuse me, guys. That whole time I did not share screen. What was I doing? I was just ranting at you guys. That's crazy. Death Guard 38%. Leagues of Voltan 40%. Adeptus Custodes 43%. Sisters 44%. Sorry, guys, I didn't share the screen. What it was is that I have this little note tab up here that I put in a new spot and it messed me up and I didn't even notice. I didn't click that button, so I'm very sorry. That's not normal. Normally, we're showing you the factions, so sorry about that. And we have the Adeptus Sororitas at the 44%, Necrons 47%, and here we see this is what we were talking about with the armies are 50%. Thousand Sons, Chaos Knights, Astra Militarum on paper, but that's not necessarily telling the truth. When you're looking at the games played versus Necrons, Adeptus Custodes, Death Guard, Imperial Knights, Grey Knights, you can see those numbers are a bit higher than some of these odd other factions to a certain extent, like Gene Stealers, Chaos Demons, Adeptus Mechanicus. Space Marines are a huge factor right there, and how many games are against them, and Tyranids as well. But that also gives me an indication that this might be people that just collected the new box set and they're trying that out, and they tend to get run over because using the peak, let's say triple Maleceptors and triple Exocrines or a bunch of Norn emissaries, stuff that's like that is what's more difficult for us. If you're playing just out of like the box set, then Tyranids aren't as difficult. So Death Guard has just been sitting at our hardest matchup since they got their rules changed to being nice and efficient. It's really good for them, a little difficult for us. It's a compounding defense debuff. So we'll go over that and we go over the matchups. But like I was saying about Meta Monday, Orks, make sure I covered this because I'm going to share screen you guys. 42% win rate as of this weekend, only 19 players. But with that said, I'm going to move in to the Ork list that we're going to go over this weekend. So James Kosh gave us a nice little twist into the meta. Like people always said, Mandos weren't it, but this Git brought 2 units of Mandos. So we'll see how he actually incorporated this list. He has a Beast Boss on Squigosaur, Ghazghkull Thraka, Nobz, Master Squig, War Boss, and Mega Armor. Followed by 1 unit of Beast Snagger Boys, 2 units, 2 units of Boys, 2 trucks, only 2 trucks, guys. Start putting this in your head. 1 unit of Burner Boys, 1 unit of Flash Gitz, but this is only a 5-man unit of Flash Gitz, and you did not see a Captain Badrock, now did you? 2 units of Gretchen, then followed by the 2 units of Kommandos. He had them kitted out the same, where he bought the Breacher Ram, he bought the Rocket, and he bought the Burner, okay, and the Power Claw, of course. 2 3-man units of Meganobz, each with twin kill saws. That's how I prefer them. I understand people when they say they like the shooters with their big power claws. Let me just keep in mind that the -3 AP makes a huge difference. Wounding something on a 2+ or a 3+ and re-rolling is much better than simply a 3+, even if you do have more attacks, as the additional AP really kind of offsets that, right? So only a 3-man unit, Squighog Boyz, and a Storm Boy unit. So this unit was off the wall, possibly running what we like to call a SWAT team around here, where they have 2 different units in 1 transport. Possibly just boys on foot slogging. It looks like this guy just took the Git and went with it. So he has Ghazghkull Thraka with the 3-man, and then a War Boss and Mega Armor just with the 3-man, So it was quite interesting. I would like to say that this was probably a typo right here where it says the Super Cyborg body, because he did have 5 points left over, which means he could have brought Ed Wappa's Kill Chopper. I'm assuming he did. Sometimes we all press the buttons mistake or whatever. So obviously the Beast Balls and Squiggle Sword doesn't need a super cyborg body, as he already has essentially a super cyborg body. So this Git using 2 units of Mandos and a Ghazghkull Thraka. Plenty of staging, plenty of boys on foot. Let's see what he went into, as he ended up getting 6th place at the Warzone GT in the United Kingdom. All right, so shout out to you, 6th place, James. So let's look at how his first matchup went. We have Drukhari. We were talking about how Drukhari is unknown. This getting you what's up. So we have an Archon with the Nightmare Shroud. Succubus, Succubus, Succubus. 3 units of witches, excuse me. 2 Raiders, 4 Venoms. Ooh, only 1 unit of Incubi. Okay. Mandrakes. This is their infiltrating, type unit that they use. What's really cool is that this unit brought 2 units of Mandos, therefore plenty of screening out of those guys, not letting them get the initiative. That's going to make a difference in Drukhari matchups to a certain extent, right? 2 units of 3 Ravagers. Okay, so plenty of Dark Lances for that. Razor Wing Jet Fighter, pretty unknown, pretty uncommon, right? That used to be very used in other editions, but in this edition, flyers have been kind of nerfed pretty hard. So kind of a fun list. 2 units of Reavers. Okay, and then he brought 2 units of Reavers. All right, cool. Not exactly the most meta version, but he did bring, plenty of transports, witches, not enough Incubi to really keep Orks off him or keep their respect. He did end up putting 100 points on that list. So having plenty of boys and being able to fill up the table, in a weird way, the burner boys might actually help a little bit in that matchup. Out of phase, kind of, not just combat phase alone. This Git had to really be into it, though, because the Mandos are one of those tech pieces that they're quite expensive, and you really have to understand that you don't have to throw them away all the time. You don't have to, people, in my own video, I said you could put them and throw them away, and sometimes that is the call against certain armies, right? But in theory, they're proper for staging and scoring all the time from that game, and just letting the enemy know, hey, I'm in this building, hiding behind this wall. You can't shoot me, and when you get here, I'm going to get within range of you. And when you have Ghaz on your list as well, which he did, he was able to just put up nasty damage, and I really appreciate that. So let's look at his second matchup, because that makes a difference, guys. Trust me, getting lethal on those boys, on those Mandos, makes something ferocious. Then he has Chaos Demons, which is interesting because in this unit list, he just has 1 unit of Squighog Boyz, and it's only a 3-man unit. Mind you, keep that in mind. He does have the Beast Boss on Squiggle Sword with Ed WAAAGH, so you have to kind of hope he spikes there, in my opinion. And really what you're looking at is with this list as well, with it having demons, as we're about to take a look at, Beastnagga Boyz with Ghaz combo is going to have to come into play at some point, hopefully. So we have Be'lakor, Shalexi Hellbane, Scarbranch, and a Changeling. 1 unit of Nurgling, 1 unit of Plague Bearers, 1 unit of Blood Crushers, 2 units of Fiends, 2 Flamers, and 2 units of Screamers. So he does have quite a bunch of little activating units. They don't like just fall over either. Blood Crushers, actually very efficient. These guys might become more in play, more common. You guys might see more of them, and actually in the meta as a whole, if people can get their hands on them or just start printing them. What I was going to put out here is that he doesn't have, the typical giant break of Squighog Boyz with Ed WAAAGH's Kill Choppa. This is where you have to understand that the Beastnagga Boyz going with Ghaz, popping Unbridled Carnage, re-rolling the hit roll to fish for those 5-up lethals is really what you use to kind of tear down one of these greater demons when they come into play. So not just Ghaz himself, but it would come into him compounding the effect of that, and not letting the Nurgling stuff you in your deployment zone, because that would be annoying as an Ork player if you don't have any kind of infiltrators and you've played against Nurglings. They could. Luckily, this guy only had 1, so I went to go look at that. But James ended up pulling out an 85-point win. Now, James is a very high-level player, as he put up 94 points in his loss. And I'll just point out his person he lost to was just get right here that got 3rd place with Death Guard, which is a difficult matchup. And he lost by literally 1 point. So literally 1 point. So we're going to take a look at that, because this Git brought the Mandos and still somehow pulled out this close matchup. So let's put down to Alex Nikoluk. Sorry, buddy. And I actually pulled a couple data sheets here so we could take a look at, because it's not necessarily the most known kind of combo of Death Guard list. So we have a Biologist Putrefier. Everybody knows he does. critical lethals on 5s, throws 3 grenades. Bam, get in there. Now, what we have here is the Lord of Virulence. So I'll just pull up his data sheet. That way, as you get this knowledge looking into what he actually does. So he's a Terminator. Ignore that part. We're just looking right now for now. He's a Master of Destruction. While this model is leading a unit, each time that model makes a ranged attack, you can reroll the wound roll. Cool, whatever. But the Blind Bombardment is what's interesting. Each time a friendly Death Guard model makes an attack with a blast weapon that is targeting a unit that is visible to this model, add 1 to the hit roll and attack, and that attack has ignore cover ability. Okay, so he's pretty much handing out +1 a hit and ignore cover, which is actually quite devastating and annoying when you look at the rest of his list. So let me see mine. I still have the witch list up. Sorry. So we have right here, and the droning is just if you fail a battle shock test, he gives you a mortal wound on a 2+, and then on a 6 it's 3. He has Mortarion, and then he brought a Tallyman, another unit that's not very common. So I brought up that data sheet as well. Now, why did you bring Tallyman? Well, 1, he farms a CP on a 7+. Okay, that's cool. Farming is always nice. And while this model is leading a unit, he add 1 to the hit roll. But what's also interesting is 2, he can be tied up with the Plague Company unit. So he can have 2 different guys on this Plague Leader unit. Everybody knows you can have multiple leaders. So he's more likely has the Biology Putrefier and this guy. And he has the Shramble Rot ability, which is each time a bear's unit is selected as a charge roll for the enemy unit until the end of the phase, subtract 2 from the charge rolls made for that unit. So he has a movement charge debuff equipped on him, equipped on the already very proficient Plague Marine break. So he's a 10-man unit Plague Marines and then a 5-man. Maybe in some games he did put the 5-man and then use it as bait or something, but you could put it on the 10-man unit to try to help defy not getting charged, because he only has 1 Rhino in there. So I'm thinking maybe he just outflanked it or something, the 5-man Plague Marine unit. Maybe he just put it up there as bait, who knows. But what's really interesting here, when you think about how we just talked about the Lord of Virulence, he does have the Predator autocannon. Predator, so he has 2 of them. 1 brick of Death Shroud Terminators. Everybody knows they're tough, reducing on -1 to wound on them when you're stronger than them. 2 floated Blight Drones, and then 2 Plague Burst Crawlers, followed by 2 Nurglings. So when you think about his damage 3 capability, having his own Nurglings to kind of place up there, and they're much cheaper than the Kommandos, still have a certain amount of staging. He doesn't have a big unit of brick of Squighog Boyz. He just has really the War Boss in Mega Armor with 3 Meganobz, and you guys know how that goes with the super low volume amount of attacks. If he places the Nurglings near the death, well, any unit really, but especially the Death Shroud, put them in a building behind them, keep them in aura range of the Nurglings -1 to hit, stack that with the -1 weapon skill. That's horrible for our 1 punching unit on this list that can really reliably punch into power armor, because he has a small unit of squigs. Then he has the Beast Boss and the Squigosaur that really needs to kind of cross the distance in the open field and try to grab one of those tanks, can be slowed and just move blocked a little bit by a drone, or the Terminators themselves, as he's not good at killing the Terminators. You know, we all know Ghaz can at least spike. I mean, not Ghaz, sorry. Well, he has Ghaz too. But Mazrog can at least spike, but this kid doesn't have Mazrog. He has a Beast Boss on Squigosaur. So, you know, that's one of those things. Now, do I think it took a bit of Mortarion coming up in bullying? Yes. Overall, this list came down to you don't have something to one-shot Mortarion. You have to hope that the Beast Snagger Boys go off or Ghaz goes off. Of course, he can just counter-fight. So when he's not one-shot, because nothing on your list can necessarily one-shot him here. You don't have Head Wappa on a big unit of Squighog Boyz. If you had a big unit of Squighog Boyz, Head Wappa, Skill Choppa, and you were within Gazru, and you popped on Broadwood Carnage, you could possibly one-shot Mortarion. Okay, but in this list you really don't, so he can start being used as a bully while everything kind of shoots you down. Plague Marines kind of stage, you have a harder time charging them because they're -2 to your charge, and there's nothing really that fast, and trying to crush the distance on here. You don't have anything but boys on foot, and all these 2 units of boys or 2 units of beast snaggers, there's no Mandos, and that could become a problem. So you're really hoping Ghaz just runs in there, does devastating wounds, more time doesn't make a bunch of funeral pain, something like that. So he didn't try to kill him, he just tried to put points on that, and they both did. But that's where I think at the end Mortarion was able to either come out and put some bullying in there to mess the score up a little bit, or the fact that he was just being, the Ork players being so cagey and running away from him made it so at the end the guy was able to just pull through with maybe a couple cards. But when you never really know when it's a 1-point game, guys, I'm just saying that either way, both of them are great players to be able to play out that game, score so high, and James lost by 1 point. So I really wanted to look at this list because even though he didn't necessarily win all his games or score in the top 5, whatever, he, in my heart, did excellent. At least a 4-1, and great job. So we'll look at his 4th matchup, which ended up being another very difficult matchup as he went to the guy who plays 4th place with a tie. So he had a tie until 1,000 Suns. So we're all used to the T Suns and what they kind of do. This guy had a little bit of a difference. So he had Ahriman, Exalted Sorcerer on disc, Infernal Master, Magnus, and then he had a 1,000 Suns Demon Prince. So the 1,000 Sun Demon Prince, I believe I pulled him up. Yes, I did. So make sure you guys can see him. Let me see. Put up. Sorry, I should have been closer. All right, that should have been closer last time too. We have once per battle at the start of any phase, you can select one friendly Rubric Marine or Scarab Assault Terminator squad within 6 of this model. Until the end of that phase, weapons equipped by models in that unit have precision ability. Hey, that's cool. Not cool. Then he has Glamour of Zeech, Aura. While a friendly 1,000 Suns unit is within 6 of this model, units have the stealth ability. So he also gives a -1 to hit at range. And then, of course, he has a Demon Prince stat line, T10, 2 up save, 10 wounds, capability to do flat 3 damage. He had the forbidden luster. No, I'm just kidding. He had the forbidden lore. The bear can be selected to use ritual, even if another psyker unit has already used that ritual phase. Very cool. Very unique. Very excellent for that. Remember, you can get 2 of those going. So, hey. Oh, sorry. And then we have the Rubric Marines with the Warflamers, another unit of Rubric Marines, Zangor for the cheapness, 1 Rhino, very useful. And what we have here is a gun line of a Mutilus Vortex Beast, a 1,000 Suns Spawn, 2 1,000 Suns Forge Fiends with Ectoplasma Cannons, and a Zangor Enlightened. Okay. So in this, we already shown that he understands that he doesn't have to kill everything when he plays into this army, right? When he plays this army, but he did keep it to one of his lowest scores. And when you're dealing with 1,000 Suns, you have to understand that Magnus can run up and put pressure on you. Possibly another unit can run up and do ultimate double moving, I believe, again on you. And with this weird little Demon Prince ability, you do have to worry a little bit about getting sniped out and precisioned. So, mind you, they always have access to devastating wounds and rerolls, very shooty. So 1,000 Suns are always a 50-50 on here, and it's kind of hilarious because getting 50-50 is literally a draw in this matchup, and James is having a rough one, in my opinion, already mentally, because 94-95, and then coming to this game, it was nail biting to the end, and then he tied on that. So he was definitely utilizing those Mandos to score guys and continue scoring nonstop, and then later was other things positioned. Then he was able to let the Mandos go, Pies Hassa, hypothetically, put Boys in place of them, punch forward with the Beast Snaggle Boys and the Meganobz. He did have a weird 5-man unit of Flash Gitz. Maybe he just added odd points over and didn't want to add another unit of Boys. Maybe he found a SWAT team combo between Flash Gitz and Burner Boys to feel useful and put them in a truck. So overall, that was just quite interesting how he possibly played that. I can't necessarily understand the 5-man Flash Gitz unit. I mean, they get punches, they're knobs, their guns could go off, but for the most part, they don't reliably perform. So I think he just kind of stuck them in there as points. So I was just taking a look at that. And then his last game, which he did win, but it was his lowest score, he went into Imperial Knights. And I'm not surprised it's the lowest score. As to when you're playing against Imperial Knights, you do have to play KG. I definitely don't. Let's take a look at those first. Canis Rex, of course, slaps. Knight Paladin slaps with Unyielding Paragon. He's a bit more of they like to pressure with him. Sometimes Canis Rex just sits back and tries to shoot you necessarily with his great cannon. We have 2 Armiger Helvrin, sorry. Autocannons, of course. Then 1, 2, 3, 4 Warglaves, and then Voidsman at Arms, Vindicator Assassin, Clades Assassin. So you don't necessarily want to wall early into the knights unless they give you like a row of 3 knights, which means they kind of misplay. For the most part, if they give you enough big knights, right, they give you a big boy and then maybe 2 little boys, of course, you can go ahead and wall. They're not respecting you. But for the most part, just letting the Knights player know I can go and WAAAGH, and also understand that you can move back with the Mandos. Now, what do you mean? You can use the Commandos to actually hem the smaller Knights where you want them, because Chaos Knights can, of course, jump through the buildings, but the baby Knights cannot necessarily jump through the buildings. And the big Knights, you can just place like a triangle position so they can't move through there. Of course, they can tag the building, but you can shut down certain lanes where you can stage with, if you use your Mandos to cut them off, or you place them right in the beginning of the game where they can continue to score and not be in range of getting shot. And just play kind of passively and start running up the score early in the game, even if it's just a little by little, and letting him know, hey, dude, I'm just going to slow play this and not call my wall. You're going to know I can do it. And, you know, but you're going to have to pre-measure for that and consistently worry about that. Sometimes it's a later game WAAAGH. And sometimes you just do like a fix and you're just like, I'm going to cleanse or deploy and then bring it down if you think you can kill them. This list, I don't think he had that in mind, but necessarily that's how most I see that going with Knights. So great job by James for the placing, even though you got a 94 to 95 loss. I mean, gosh, even when it's in with 10 points, that can go either way. 5 points especially, but a 1-point game, come on. So and then following up with the tie. So pretty headstrong from you to still finish it out with the win at the end. Wanted to get you some recognition because you did a great job with 20 Mandos. No one believed in them. I believed in them, and clearly so did you. But you seem to understand that I'm going to bring multiple, I guess, and that was really interesting to see. So hopefully the guys appreciated that. We'll go over it one more time. It's a Beast Boss and Squiggle Store with what I assume is Edwappa Skill Chopper because he had 5 points left over. So obviously he doesn't need super cyborg body. We have Ghazghkull Thraka, Nama Smasherquig, no enhancements. War Boss in Mega Armor, no enhancements. 2 units of Beast Snagger Boys, 2 boys, only 2 trucks. A Burner Boy unit, a Flashgate unit. Yes, just a 5-man Flashgate unit. 2 units of Gretchen, 2 units of Kommandos, 2 units of Meganobz with twin kill saws, 1 mech gun with a Bubba Chukka, 1 Squighog Boy 3-man unit, and a Storm Boy. So let's go. This list, in my opinion, revolved around Ghaz executing you on the WAAAGH, and this guy having enough small units between Beast Snaggers, boys, Mandos automatically being placed, not having to run into the open and die, just to put up a score and really just hem enemies in where he wanted them and probably execute them. Because if you can keep the Mandos and kind of keep you in, then when you call Ghaz's WAAAGH and he's in the mid table most of the time, you get the most units into that and take advantage of that. So great job to James Kosh. Now, the next list we're going to go over. This Git performed great, but this was about 2 weeks ago instead. I went back a week because I realized I didn't cover this list as I wasn't going over this website, so I got a little bit more familiar with it. And this Git went 5-0 last week. I believe it was the 23rd of the weekend of the 23rd. So this is Danny Porter getting 5 wins with the Orks at the JP Cup. So let's take a look at Danny Porter. Oh, sorry. Let's take a look at, because I believe this shows in a different way. This website a little less familiar. So were you guys able to see that? No, it looks like you weren't able to see that. So I'll pull up. Oh, because it pulled up a different screen. Okay. Hold on, give me 1 second. I can either pull this up, stick it on here, hopefully. No. Okay. Either way, I can look at it this other way. Oop. And we'll go into games. So here's his games right here. I'll show you in a second his list. He has 5 games, and his first game was down here against Alexander Koshik. Now, and this, when you look at it this way, it actually shows both lists side by side, which would be easier for you to track in a certain way, but I'll zoom in a little better. Oops, that's all the way. And let's go over the Ork list, and then we'll talk about the Death Guard list. So this game, he put up 12 points. It was ITC scoring. So, I mean, I believe so. I believe, or how they do it in Europe, where they do 20 points, and the difference of your actual game score gives you the points between the 20 points that get split. So the closer the number is, essentially in value, that means it was closer a game it was. So this is a very close game, not surprising. So he had Danny from the Try Hard Orks. Let's go, Danny. He had to Follow Me, Lads, and Kind of a Brutal on this list. So he had Captain Badrock, Mazrog Scragbag, Ghazghkull Thraka, Death Killer War Trike with super cyborg body, 2 regular war bosses, and a war boss in mega armor, who had Follow Me Lads. Okay. It wrote kind of brutal up there, but it wasn't that. He had Super Cyber and to Follow Me Lads. Okay. One 10-man unit of Ghazghkull Boyz. One 10-man unit of Flash Gitz. 2 Gretchen. 2 Meganobz with twin kill saws. A 5-man unit of Meganobz with twin kill saws. 2 5-man units of what we like to call a Scalpel unit, which is a War Boss and a Knob unit. Storm Boys, and then 4 trucks. So very tight, concise list. 4 trucks, plenty of action monkeys, Ghazghkull Boyz to get in there, get punching for volume, or just throw away in a trade. I'm really digging, and I think other people are too, the value of Meganobz with the twin kill saws and AP -3 is we really don't like to see Armor of Contempt, and we're really annoyed by all the high toughness, low value point-wise vehicles and transports that we have to get rid of. Running in there with some Meganobz, and in this case, a War Boss and Mega Armor seemed to be his kind of value that he wanted. And so the Squighog Boyz is jumping out of a truck, getting stuck in, and then actually taking some armor saves after it, though, right? So this is a no-fat list. I really appreciate this list. I would run something like this, no problem. Ghaz obviously is optimal on this list. You can see he has plenty of units that can enjoy his lethal aura and plenty of staging for having 4 trucks. But let's see what he had to go into the first game, which is essentially, not surprisingly, one of his harder games. So we had a Mortarion, Typhus, Biologist Putrefier, and a Foul Blightspawn. A 10-man unit of Plague Marines, that was a war gear. A 5-man unit of Plague Marines, another 5-man unit of Plague Marines, 2 Rhinos, 1 Cultist unit, not necessarily common, 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, another one of those Predator Destructors, 2 Floated Bloat Drones. This is what we're talking about for annoying cheap vehicles, right? I'm not saying you throw Meganobz into this necessarily, but this is one of those things that just cheap for them to throw in your face and try to delay you. Way more durable than it should be for its points, and it's not necessarily hurting you, but it still does have a flamer. And then 2 units of Nurglings, which we already know that's at least the bare minimum these Gitz are going to bring. So for what it is. So plenty of indirect, plenty of firepower when you kind of get to the mid-table, stuff to hold you in the mid-table between the drones. Of course, everybody's favorite unit of Plague Marines with the Biologist Putrefier and a Foul Blightspawn, so you get that fight first. And then Typhus, he's really good. He's all right. I don't think he's necessarily his point value, but we know why Death's Regard is a difficult matchup. This was his list dough, and he did pull that out. Danny pulled that first game out, starting his okay. I just got rid of that. I think I just got rid of all that. So let me pull that back up. You guys are gonna have to bear with me here. Oops, wrong thing. You guys are gonna have to bear with me on this one because I just destroyed that whole thing. I've never done that before. Meta Monday. I have to find that. So there wasn't this week. It was the 25th, I believe, because it was last week's. I have to find that again. I can't believe I did this. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. He was undefeated. Because he came from this website that I'm not familiar with. So I had to actually come look it up again. I believe it was on here. I'm feeling. Ooh. Maybe it was 2 weekends ago and I was wrong. I guess it was 2 weekends ago. Oh, yeah, it was 318, I believe. Yeah, I believe. Sorry, guys, I've never done this before, so bear with me. I've never closed it down like that. Here it is. This is the website. Hey, shout out to tourneykeeper.net. Oh, yes. I have to go through all of this again. Warhammer 40k, Poland. Not playing now. Previous tournaments. Thanks for the ad. I guess now you guys can see how this website works too, huh? Previous tournaments. JP Cup. I wasn't giving up on this list, guys. Sorry. And we're back to where we're supposed to be. Okay. Sorry about that. Let you guys down. Turn you. Danny Porter. All right. As for his second matchup, he went into the Thousand Suns. Great job. He ended up getting a 20-0 right here against Thousand Suns. So let's take a look at this 1,000 Suns list. He has Aroman, Infernal Master, Magnus de Ren, 1,000 Sun Sorcerer, 1,000 Sun Sorcerer, and Terminator armor. 1, 2, 3, 4 units of Rubric Marines, a unit of Zangors, 1,000 Suns Rhino, 1 Mutilated Vortex Beast, a 5-man unit of Terminators for that Sorcerer, a 2 units of Chaos Spawn. Okay, not the typical list, as he did bring Terminators. Terminators aren't necessarily bad. Let's see what else. And he had the 3-man units of Rhino of Rubrics. Would I say the Terminators threw this off and made this not a great list? No, I would know. I would just say that they do have a certain kind of archetype that is quite reliable that they've been running, and usually it's just more of those characters to get more of your abilities and your cabal points. And they don't necessarily fight too good, but if I believe the Terminators could fight. I think if you're on an objective or something like that, they get rerolls. But yeah, so that was the second game, getting a 20-0. Let's see, this third game here into Necrons, and then here he got a 19-1 difference. So he's really getting in this for this points, guys. This is one of the most devastating wins so far that we're seeing here. We have a Necron unit with a Canoptic Court. We have a Max Mark Destroyer, Luminar Caesaris, 3 Technomancers. We already know what's coming here, huh? A Satan, 1 Deathmark, Scarab Swarm, 2 individual Locust Destroyers, and then a Heavy Destroyer, and then 3 units of Wraiths with 3 Doomstalkers. So he wants a couple little, somewhat durable Action Monkey kind of tiny units, a little bit of infiltrating, so that way he can kind of end up where he wants, even though they have the ability to already have an infiltrating Wraith unit. So he just wanted more, I guess, a cheap kind of infiltrator. And then the Wraiths. Now, I'll tell you what, right now, guys, who really makes a big difference in this matchup is Ghazghkull Thraka. Because when they come to stat check you in the middle, you have something to give a ridiculous amount of volume into someone, to one unit, and just straight picking those guys out. Of course, you always have the ability to try to epic challenge and kill the character, that Technomancer, as he's quite soft. There aren't 2 Cthans on this list, which would make a difference. But having everything staged in trucks, being able to hide them a little bit from the Doomstalkers, hopefully would be nice. And of course, you want the flash kits to go off if they can in this matchup, which, they can, but you can't rely on it necessarily, right? So, great job by him. This is definitely something you have to tech for. And what I always say is Ghaz makes a huge matchup in anybody trying to stat check you as a whole. And something like this, where where they're going to be standing, where they're going to be, and you can just straight up execute into them, and they're just challenging you like that. They're not going to do a good time into that if you bring Ghaz. So, of course, remember, pop on Brother Carnage for critical 5s. That way you get lethals on 5s. And that just throws people on their head. And then in his 4th matchup, he went into Space Wolf Stormland. Speaking of people who want to throw stuff in your face, we have a Wolf Guard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf, another Wolf Guard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf, Wolf Lord on Thunderwolf, and a Wolf Lord on Thunderwolf. 3 5-man units of Assault Intercessors with jump packs, an Eliminator, 3 Inceptors, 2 units of Thunderwolf Cavalry, Basilisk Dread, a Repulsor Executioner, a Wolfen Dreadnought, a Wolfen Dreadnought, an Inquisitorial Henchman. Yeah, okay, so I would say this is still quite useful list. It was one of those things that you're a little happy, not necessarily happy, but you're not intimidated necessarily by as much of these jump pack guys, even though they can put mortals into you. They are quite cheap. They do still fall over in a reliable manner. And they're not wolfen, is what you should be happy about, right? That's what really comes into play. Having Inceptors is useful on their list, but only having 2 units of Thunderwolf Cavalry on your go turn, if they're within range of you, you can just punch those guys out with not only just Ghaz himself, but of course with having enough volume into them. Death Killer Ward Trike being able to run up on them and really just kind of move them around and make them bait. Hey, do you want to move? Hey, do you want to move to get away from me? Being able to throw bad rook shots into them even when they're in the transport is a little nice, but you do have to worry about the actual return firepower because he does have a repulsor. It's just one of those things that normally they want to stuff people in their deployment zone. And by the time you chew through all of their Wolfens, their cavalry, then their Wolfen are also coming in and hitting you, and you're still kind of stuck there, or they've annihilated you. In this case, I don't think he had enough pressure, things to kind of hold him back. reliably enough, especially when you give him a free WAAAGH if you decide to try to stuff him. So if you delay as a Space Wolf player, then the Ork gets to just stage with all these trucks and then selectively pick fights into things it's going to win. So yeah, it's one of those things that this one can go either way. The Wolf and Dreads are a nice touch. They are quite, killy, and their return damage. They try to, get their punch back on you, but it's one of those things that you're glad that you have so much AP on this list to deal with, like just punching through Armor of Contempt on some of these other units so they can reliably go down, like the Wolf and Dread, for example. And having Ghaz there just throws it to the Wolf and are getting lethal all over the place. And that would make a difference because their toughness isn't what you want, but volume of attacks wounding them is what they hate to see, because the 4-up envelope can go either way. And then last but certainly not least, he went into everybody's favorite, Adeptus Custodes. And again, he threw up a crazy 1901 score. So this is why I wanted to show you this, even though I got lost in the sauce back there. Closing down the actual link on accident. Normally I'm using tabs, and this one it was the website. I had to show you this Git because he was still putting that work in. So you had Trajan Valoris, followed by these guys. Sorry, that's pretty cool. What are we gonna say? This is a Blade Champion, and then these are, what are these guys? I don't even know what these guys are. That's fantastic. I know what this is. Draxus and a Caladius Assassin. Let's go. He had 2 units of Guardians, 2 40 points of, I don't know what that is. Okay. All right. I guess this wasn't translated. So he had some Wardens and, oh, here it was. I was messing with you guys. See, I guess it was in English. I don't know why I did that. Okay. This website is just throwing me on my head today, guys. I'm sorry. Okay. Trajan Valoris, Blade Champion. 2 more Blade Champions, Caladius Assassin, Lord Inquisitor Draxus, 2 Custodian Guard, 2 Prosecutor Squads with the Witch Seeker Squad, 3 units of Wardens. Boom. All right, guys, I got through that. So plenty of Blade Champions to get those punches in. Triple Wardens. Everybody hates to see that, but we hate to see as Ork players, if you have a bunch of Cladius, at least one Cladius a grav tank to kind of pop things, in my opinion, and disembark us and kill us. In this case, you don't. We have a bunch of trucks and the Death Killer War Trike on our Gitz list over here. So in that case, it actually doesn't feel as bad. That we have a bunch of stuff to tag them, move them around, try to score, box them out of the objective. Hopefully we go first on that matchup. Hopefully he did go first and get that in there. So it is one of those things that this guy is definitely very refined with this list because he's putting up the crazy amount of points. So he was optimizing his movement and the utility of his trucks, which is how you kind of deal with these custodes at the moment, because you don't necessarily always have to kill them. You have to just out-OC them sometimes and surround them and move block them and delay them and make them fight through trucks and make a wall, maybe 2 trucks side by side, and push them on the table. Like, haha, you cannot, even after you punch these, you cannot just move on to the objective and I'm still scoring it and my truck's still blocking you out and you don't have Terminators to redeploy. And it becomes one of those things that you're playing a completely different kind of skill-based game when you're going into this unit, that kind of matchup, and you're just taking advantage of him not having anything to reliably pop the trucks. And you're taking advantage of when it is your go turn, to fight on death, and you're mind managing your CP while constantly scoring. And that's what this kid did. So great job to him. Going 5-0 at the JP Cup is Danny Porter. So with the great score overall, putting up 80 points. You can see he had ridiculous core differentials in all his matchups. So we just wanted to show him and give him some love in that. So great job for Danny Porter. Whoa, with the 5-0 run through. So last but not least, we're going to go over from someone from this weekend, which was Scott DeBrinter Wickle. Okay, so I think your name's messing with me, or maybe it's your real name. Not sure. But this gate was kicking it old school, bringing the Grot Tanks with this. So before we look at him, let's look at the events real quick. So we have a pretty large event of 170 players. This was in Canada at the West Coast GT 40k champs. So even though he did go 4-2 and he's lower down into the 20s, I still wanted to cover him because he was from this weekend and he still did pretty good overall. And he was hiding, calling himself a free blue. So let's take a look at this Git who brought it back. to what we're kind of familiar with the Grot Tanks and the Squighog Boyz and things we like. So he's calling this bad rooking the boys. One key note in this list is no Ghazghkull. Think about that as we go into the matchups. So we have Captain Badrook, Mazrog Scragbag, Namad Smasher Squig, Namad Smash Squig with Edwapa's Kill Choppa, and a War Boss who Follow Me lads. 2 trucks, 1 unit of Flash Kits, 2 Gretchen, 2 units of Grot Tanks, 1 big unit of Nobz, 2 units of Squighog Boyz, and his Storm Boy unit. So he brought back the Grot Tanks. Everybody loves their flat damage 3, reactionary moves, a big unit of Nobz. Here's what I'll say though, as I've been a big fan of Nobz, as you guys know, since the beginning of the Codex, I was calling them out. If you look at any of our videos, even back then, tier list videos and such, Nobz are of course great. We all understand that and know that now, but they still struggle with certain toughnesses and certain things reducing their damage. Therefore, I'm very, very much almost to the point that I'm only in favor of using a 10-man unit of Nobz if it's meta dependent, like you really think you need that into certain profiles. Let's say you fight a bunch of Terminators or something. But really, I really see them going into is you only bring them in that big 10-man unit if you have Ghazghkull Thraka on your list. So keep that in mind. 2 units of Grot Tanks. Of course, what I would say is I like Grot Tanks a lot, as in their profile, their stats. You know, weird durability, weird movement, as in weird for us. Reactionary move shenanigans and flat damage 3, but hitting on 4s is quite unreliable. And I know it says big shooter and big shooter, but I'm just assuming he didn't change the profiles on that. Because they just say big shooter by default, but we know that you brought the rockets for that, right? And of course, the Follow Me lads is quite useful when you're bringing that big brick. So now that we looked at Bad Ruck and the boys, let's take a look at some of his matchups. So Bad Ruck and the boys, first matchup, Thousand Suns. We're just seeing Thousand Suns all over the place, guys. Thousand Suns are becoming more prevalent as people are realizing how strong they are, and it's just funny that our Gitz ran into a bunch of them. So we have Thousand Suns, Armament, Exhausted Sorcerer on disc, and other Exhausted Sorcerer on disc, Infernal Master, Magnus the Red, and the Thousand Suns Demon Prince. We're looking at almost the same exact list that we looked at from another event. 2 Rubric Marine, 3 and a big unit, a third big unit of Rubric Marines, followed by 2 Zangors, 2 Chaos Spawn, Zangor, and 2 Zangor Enlightened. So a bunch of characters as we've seen before. None of those kind of shooting units like the Mutilous Vortex Beast to pop your trucks, which is something you kind of like to see. So they're a bit more susceptible to staging and you know, running up on you, and I mean you running up on them and pressuring them. In this case, he actually does have a unit that can really at least keep Magnus the Red honest. Of course, we know he can reduce damage, he can blank a save, but it comes down to one of those things: is do you have volume in to put into him and wound him? And we do. So he does need to be wary of that. And we have redundancy between 2 units of Squighog Boyz into that, right? And of course, all the characters. So as for this score, he put up a 97-point win. We know what Thousand Suns do. It does come to player execution. I don't think his small extra units really did their job of delaying the Orks in that case, and having flat 3 damage shots and having them something to actually shoot at those units of Rubric Marines is pretty nice. Even though, of course, we know the Demon Prince can give them the -1 to hit also, right? Keep that in mind when we were looking at that. Sorry, we went over that before. This Demon Prince with the Forbidden Lore has an aura of reducing -1 to hit right here because he has the stealth ability. So keep that in mind. And he has the precision that he gives them. So great job to Scott for pulling that out, you know, overcoming the weirdness of the T-Suns. Second game, he goes into Space Wolves. He has Librarian Phobos armor, Lord Grimnar. Oh, here we go, boys. Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf. Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf. Another Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf. 3 Thunderwolf Lords on Thunderwolves. Excuse me. 2 Infiltrator squads. 2 Scout Marine squads. 1, 2, 3 bricks of Thunderwolf Cavalry, followed by 1, 2 units of Wolfen. There we go. So he actually came down to the thickness, boys, and the Wolfen redundancy. He did bring infiltrators, probably dealing with hypercrypt or people getting his backfield because he's throwing everything forward. But really, what you notice is what he doesn't have is any kind of shooting, so that's nice. Squighog Boyz actually can shoot through Thunderwolf Cavalry, so that's nice for us. And this Git at least has a couple trucks. You could, in this situation, hope that the Grot Tanks go off and run out in the open to move block, shoot at them, and then fall back when they get within range because they have reactionary moves. Or just hope that some of those damage 3 go off, use them maybe even to delay so you can counterpunch with the Squighog Boyz and the Nobz can disembark and really chew through them. This is a mission or a play of tack. You have to be pretty smart and understand that these guys are going to go off and hit you pretty hard when they want to, and they might take the initiative of you if they let them, especially because you have 2 units of scouts. So there's one of those things you got to go, hey, man, sometimes you got to put Maz up there and try to move block a whole lane with Maz and just say, hey, come get him, see if you can punch through him and then return damage or, get Maz to charge in and hope that he put those dev through chopper mouths through. So that was a great one. I'm sure he had a good, hard, rough scrap there, getting 80 points. Very common army you're going to have to tech for and think about when you match up. Now, in this matchup, he ended up losing his 3rd game and not doing a great score. So we can only assume why, but we can see it's a Blood Angels list with the Iron Storm Spearhead. So he has Tech Marine with Targeting Augur Array, another Tech Marine with Adept of Demasan, and then another Tech Marine with Master Machine Mortar. So 3 of the 3 best enhancements just straight up. 2 Basilisk Dreads, a Death Company Dreadnought, which I'll show you that data sheet, an Inceptor Squad, an Infiltrator, 2 Infiltrator Squads, 2 Redemptor Dreadnought, a Repulsor Executioner, 1 Scout, 1 Whirlwind, and a Caladius Assassin. So we'll just take a look at the Death Company Dread because he's just a little less common, and of course we're already looking at an odd Spearhead list, so why not just take a look at this too. So he has, for melee, he has Blood Talon, 7 attacks, twin linked, hitting on 3, strength 8, -2, 3 damage. So then he has for you're also double fisting you, I guess. There's 5 attacks, strength 12, -3, flat 3 damage. He has an OC of 0 if he's not within a friendly chaplain, which he wasn't. And every time he's hit, he gets to essentially hit you back right away. And if you shoot at him, he gets to shoot back at you right away. That's his thing. And he doesn't have the smoke ability, but he has +2 to the charge roll if it's a monster or a vehicle. So he could just run up and hope that he can get into Maz and hope that he can put some damage through, but not reliably. 4-up invuln roll the way, baby. As a whole, though, it's one of those other tech pieces that he could try to delay you with and kind of put it up on you. And having Dreadnoughts, we all know Dreadnoughts, like we said earlier, with the Nobz, they're not enjoying these Redemptor Dreadnoughts. Of course, Squighog Boyz aren't either, to the extent of only Edwappa Skill Choppa does, because you can Armor of Content with these Gitz and then be saving on a 2+ with all your Squighog Boyz. And then you have the only Red Wappas Choppa hoping to do damage, but he's reducing damage on that too. And then you also have the other Dreadnought that's standing there. And if he's not getting hit by the other Squigs, he's getting hit by the Nobz, let's say, they're wounding him on a 5+. So if you don't have Ghaz there to throttle into them and chew them down, if the Ironstorm player understands that and puts them forward and then guns you down with the Repulsioners, funnels you in with the Scouts, box you in with some of the Inceptors and starts countercharging you, hoping to pop down some of those, Squighog Boyz on the way in, that could be a factor too. So I can see how this ended up going hard. The mission of play always comes into a factor, but hey, dropping one or two, that just happens at big events like this. So his 4th matchup, he went into Space Marines, the straight up Gladius Task Force. Vanilla as can be, boys. Let's go. So he has Apothecary Biologist, Magnus Kalgar, Rebute Gilliman, and a Tech Marine with the Honor Vehement. So my boy is coming out here with straight up Ultra Vanilla. Let's go. And this at least puts a smile on your face if you're gonna go play and you just took a hard loss. You're like, well, at least I get to crump some beakies, OG style. We got Intercessors, an Aggressor Squad, a Gladiator Lance, a Gladiator Reaper, Inceptors, Infiltrators, Terminator Squad, 5-man unit with Power Fists. So as a whole, when you're going into these Space Marines, they don't have enough stuff to play the mid-table with you. Rebute Gilliman still has a monster keyword, so he's getting beat up. When I said a big unit of Nobz can go into Terminators, here we go, right? Here's Manius Calgar, even with him, you're throwing a big unit of Terminators into those guys, popping Unbridled Carnage. You're very on the wall. You're very much chewing through them in a reliable manner for the most part. And he just, after that, he doesn't have anything left, and he's hoping his Gladiators win hard, but you should be staging and hiding. And then the Squighog Boyz chew through anything else on that list quite easily and can probably tank at least one of the shooting phases if he tears down one of them, and then the second one comes in, right? So that's the thing when you're running 2 units of Squighog Boyz like this. The one that doesn't have the enhancement tends to be kind of like the bait. Just let him go in there and get murked. So that happens. Great job there. And his 5th game, he did end up losing. And in this game, he ended up losing to, making sure I missed that one, the Canoptic Court. Now, speaking of wanting gas, this is one of those things where it definitely helps, and this will be coming to play. So we'll take a look. And this is a very, very peak prime kind of list. So we have Catan, the Shard of the Nightbringer, Catan of the Void Dragon, 3 Technomanters, and another Catan. So he brought all the Wraiths and the Catans. Ugh. 3 Canoptic Doomstalkers. Or sorry, just 2, excuse me. Uberlife, just 2. 1 Scarab, and then 3 Wraiths with a Locust Destroyer. So this is one of those cases where he ran up and stat checked you, and he just has all these activations with these little units that between like the Skatans. What I mean is little units is they're a whole durable character that's going to run up and get in the way, and the courts are just going to stand there. If you let them, the Doomstalkers are perfect profiles for shooting out your transports. Still put annoying damage on the Beast Squighog Boyz as they try to run up the field. Of course, we have Feel No Pains, but anything can happen. And then these guys are great for just shooting at our Grot Tanks in this matchup. The Grot Tanks can whiff and not do much into the raids. Maybe they get lucky some games, but in other games they don't. And this is just one of those things that you're going to have to expect to see this also in events that you go to, especially really big ones. And this is where Ghaz comes into play sometimes, and he just lets you know I'm punching through these, retaking that center, and you stat check the wrong Gitz. But this is something that's just no shame in losing to. Very, very much a high value and high performing list, and low skill necessarily to pilot. So, great job to Scott, still putting up 73 points there, but it happens. And then last but not least on his matchups, we had the Eldar Wayleaper. Starting with the Eldar Wayleaper, a Avatar of Cain, Farseer, and then Fugen trying to get back up. Shroud Runner, a Wraith Knight, a big old Wraith Knight. Let's go, bringing it back old school style. Support weapon, support weapon, support weapon. 2 units of Swooping Hawks, 2 units of 5-man Spiders. So most of his points are between the Avatar and the Wraith Knight. The Wraith Knight's going to try to just sit back most likely, right? Or is this the fighting one? Yeah, so he's just trying to shoot you down from back to the table. I don't think if you go first in this is so much pressure because he also has just the stationary guns and some Swooping Hawks, these support weapons. And the Avatar, this is one thing that he doesn't want to see. He doesn't want to see a bunch of Squighog Boyz running at him. Or even just letting Flash Gitz even shoot at him, I guess, would be kind of annoying. Maybe. I don't remember if he's T12. He's probably not. So, but I'm saying there's not much for them else to kill because they're not killing the Wraith Knight, where you're just running up the field, running through the Avatar where you try to delay you, and then most likely Fugen and maybe the Warrior Brayleap are going to be like, no, we have to delay you and countercharge you at the end of the game, and then they end up dying too. Because there's really nothing else to keep you off them. Warp Spider maybe move block you once, right? But in this case, it's one of those things that they don't like pressure. And I'm sure that guy was doing excellent because he even got this far, but hey, he put up 94 points on him. So shout out to Scott D. Winterly. Let's go. Whoa, let's go. Great job going 4-2 with a different kind of list, bringing it back to Squighog Boyz, bringing it back to Grot Tanks. That's really what was different, and I appreciated about it. And that you didn't go, different, not using too much strength trucks, only using 2. So shout out to you. So with that being said, I'll give my closing ideas and thoughts and look at what the chat had to say in response. Sorry about earlier. If you're new here and I did that to you, unfortunate for me really that I underperformed in front of you guys on accident, and I put the screen down and didn't start with screen sharing. So I apologize to anybody who endured that and is still here. So shout out to you, Gitz. And let me just say what you guys got to say in response to some of those lists we went over. Let's go, Ag. I'm quite behind in chat. Let's go. So he goes, Ghaz has been underwhelming for me in my last 10 games I've run with him. Though possibly also a skill issue. It could also be that, 1, you're not going into matchups that he's needed necessarily. And then 2, it could be just not your style. Some people really just like trash. Some people really just like Squighog Boyz. So just because this is advised or shown to you, it's really just matchup dependent on what you're going into. It's not like you always have to bring him just because he's good, so. I usually advance Ghaz turn 1 so he doesn't shoot, but I get him into cover, hide him near terrain to pounce. Yeah, there we go. People start bringing him in a wagon one day. Said that's interesting. Sometimes he fails me, but his buff is definitely an MVP. It one of those things that it's a matchup thing, in my opinion, where if Ghaz is good or not in your meta. People are saying, yeah, so some of those guys in the chat are talking about how they get debuffed by the indirect and they're getting killed by that. Bringing them from the side table. I don't really like to do that, but yeah. He said, I'm still in denial. I missed when Ghaz was a monster. That's awesome. Why? I mean, I know why you missed it, because he was a monster, but I mean, it's really nice that he's infantry, right? So, hey. He tried the war boss with follow me, lads. I still run every game, even though he's can be swingy. Let's go and zag. All right, you get. So, with that being said, is Ghaz leading the way for the WAAAGH? Yes and no. There's just some matchups, let's say Sisters of Battle, for example, where you might not just get to return on him, right? Just not enough stuff. It could be also that he's a bit hard for you to get in, where you need him to get in and people understand how to screen and do the things that you want. You're scared to lose him. Maybe you just roll a 1 and you don't take the saves on Ghaz, but you take on Makari and then you take on Makari and Ghaz, that Makari dies right away. You know, I've done that when I first started using him. But as a whole, Orks really do appreciate the lethal capability to punch through the T10. If you're not bringing Ghaz for the understanding of popping Unbridled Carnage and to punch through toughness models, you don't necessarily need him. If you're playing in a meta that's a lot of fast stuff and things you're going to go through, you can go ahead and do that. If you like using Squighog Boyz, they're still totally viable. We went through a list to have 2 units of Squighog Boyz still. I like the Beast Boss on foot, but there's a couple ways that I would just not appreciate putting him in, just because he's so expensive and you're paying for the truck as well. And then also the Beast Boss and the Squigosaur, you know, he's a hit or miss for me, but sometimes he can be an answer too, right? Because he acts as an anchor and a possibility to kind of kill small, weak armor and monsters. So how are Orks doing? You know, overall, we're still sitting in the middle of the pack. Our codex is possibly coming. It still got delayed. I had been guessing until May as, you know, being negative, and I'm almost still feeling like it's going to come in May. You can see we got passed up by Tau, and Space Marines are being called, Chaos Space Marines. So we'll see how this all kind of turns out. The meta is going to be quite crazy and wacky as soon as that hits the floor. So we'll hit the ground running here. We'll be hitting lists and trying out all the different archetypes that come out. I'm definitely looking forward to a new book, as right now we're pretty hemmed into what we can bring and what's efficient. We don't have a lot of good internal balance. We struggle against high toughness units and reduction of damage. We also suffer to indirect and even other armies that can out-horde us, which doesn't really feel good. You know, Guard being able to bring guys back and shoot indirect with us can feel powerful. So all in all, Orks are still doing good. But you guys got to just know what's, you know, favorable for you and matchup dependent. If you're going to play against certain friends, you might need Mandos. If you're going to play against other people, you might need Squighog Boyz. If you're going to play against a bunch of activations, you might want a bunch of squat teams and stuff like that. So I still think we're in an okay place. We did take kind of some indirect hits from other people taking for custodes and fighting other things, but hey, Orks are still doing great. It's still the rise of the green tide. And yeah, I just want to say I apologize for earlier, but there's always one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall, because we knock your teeth out. Whoa.